What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rantin review. We're talking today about the new Disney Plus series, the next part of Marvel Phase 4, and that is Loki. Now, to be honest, when I first heard they were doing the Disney Plus shows, this was the only one I actually had any interest in. I didn't have that much interest in WandaVision or in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but I had some interest, but not as much as I had for Loki. This is the one I really wanted to see. And I was a little bit worried because the first two series that they've had, that being Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision, the first episodes were both very, very slow. My thought is that they were probably going to do the same thing with Loki here, that the first episode or two is going to be kind of, oh, I don't know what's going on, this is kind of weird, whatever, and it would be slow, and no, not so much. Which I don't mind because I like the slow burn of those first two series, but this one, you kind of get right into it and they start explaining a lot of things really quickly. So we start off going back to that now infamous scene from Avengers Endgame where the Avengers were trying to go back to the Battle of New York in 2012, the first Avengers movie, and re-steal the Tesseract. But it went awry, and we saw in that movie, of course, Loki got his hands on it and disappeared with the Tesseract, which leads us into the beginning of this series. He winds up in the deserts of Mongolia, where he's trying to espouse upon a couple of humans that he is here with burdened with glorious purpose. And then these people show up out of nowhere, and he has a confrontation with them that doesn't quite go so well for Loki. The one girl actually hits him with her baton and then slows him down, so the wobble of his face from the blast lasts in real time. So it's something that probably would have been poor, but it's extended. The pain is extended in real time. It's just, and that's the first of many indications on how they're going to screw around with time in this show. We see he's taken to the Time Variance Authority, and they essentially are the judge, jury, and executioners, I guess, of the timeline. And they go through this whole thing with this very useful animation that they did to kind of explain what the Time Variance Authority is and how there's this main timeline, this kind of pristine timeline that's a combination of all the timelines. And if there's too many things breaking off or colliding with each other, it could break the whole timeline, because in the ancient days, there was this big war between the timelines. And then these three time guardians or whatever, they came in and straightened it all out, and now they've created this agency to keep the timeline from being screwed up by people a lot worse than Loki. This brings us in with Mobius, who is Owen Wilson's character. Owen Wilson is fantastic in this, by the way, too. Him and Tom Hiddleston are absolutely fantastic in this. And he comes in and he's basically telling Loki, hey, you know what? You are about to be executed and erased from time altogether, but I think I've got something else for you to do. And he goes through this whole process through the middle part of the episode 1 of breaking down Loki. And it's really this interesting game of mental chess that Loki, with all of his arrogance and his hostility, is going up against Owen Wilson, who's kind of very passive. He knows everything about Loki. He knows what Loki is and more than we know about Loki. And he's looking at Loki as a means to an end for something, and he's just trying to kind of casually break down Loki in kind of the same way back in The Walking Dead. Remember when Negan broke down Rick, but in a much more brutal way? This is the same kind of a thing happening to Loki, but obviously with nowhere near the violence that Negan used. And the question I started asking myself as I was watching is because Loki escapes at one point, is this all part of the timeline that Mobius already knew was going to happen? Or is it true that the Time Variance Authority lives outside of the timeline? Because that's what they set it up as. This place where Loki is at, that Owen Wilson is an agent in, is the domain of the Time Variance Authority. And they have this kind of a pocket place that lives outside of time. Now, I think in the comic books, which has always been a very interesting theory about Time Guardians, is that it was a civilization created at the very end of time to go back and maintain all the time that would come before it. Now, I think here in the TV show, they're doing it a little bit different, just kind of saying that it's kind of separate from all of the main timelines, kind of like a meta entity that overlooks the timeline itself. They're one removed from it. So, I don't know, because you know how these Marvel shows go. There's going to be a lot of twists in it, and you already see them setting a lot of that up here in episode 1. There's a couple of favorite actors that I have. I'm noticing a lot of faces from Black Mirror showing up in the MCU lately, especially with these Marvel TV shows. A couple of them appear in here. In fact, the young ladies, one of the young ladies is from my favorite ever episode of Black Mirror. But there's not a lot of cast in here. There's some funny stuff in here. You get the Marvel humor mixed in with just the weirdness of the concept. That even Loki makes fun of. Is like, this is just ridiculous. Like, there's 3 space lizards that control all the time. This is preposterous. And Owen Wilson's like, yeah, whatever. And the real interesting thing, though, like I said before, is Mobius, I should say, Mobius breaking down Loki and getting Loki to kind of see that his whole thing of telling the Midgardians, or the humans, that, you know, their free choice was an illusion and they shouldn't believe in it. Well, Mobius is kind of telling Loki, well, you're not outside of that. You're kind of in it, too. This leads to a admission from Loki later on, because in the early parts of the episode, he's comparing this whole time variance thing to some illusion. And it's an illusion used by the weak in order to get what they want, essentially. I'm paraphrasing there. And then later on, Loki admits that that's what he was doing. He was using these illusions. He didn't enjoy killing people, which Mobius asked him. It was an illusion used by the weak to maintain control. A line that I'm going to steal and use in real life, because we got a lot of that going on in this day and age. But the illusion is the illusion is used by the weak to gain and control power. Yeah, I'm going to be using that a lot. But Loki's great escape doesn't really go too far. In the course of it, we find out that just some lowly like pencil pusher is in the office, and Loki kind of threatens him with flaying him like a fish, even though the guy has no idea what a fish is. But he's like, because he's lived in his desk in his office in this Time Variance Authority world. He doesn't have any idea what's going on. There's like a whole bunch of timelines. Fish might not exist in most of them. Who knows? But he goes and shows Loki. Loki's asking for the Tesseract, because Loki's thinking, I'm going to get the Tesseract, get the hell out of here. It's a space stone. It's one of the freaking Infinity Stones. An Infinity Stone, which were like the most powerful thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for like the last 11 years. Feared, terrifying, created vision, did all this other stuff, wreaked havoc, ended half of life in the known galaxy and everything else. And here, they're paperweights. You know, the concept of the Infinity Stones was a big, massive concept that they didn't really touch on as much, as nowhere near the just kind of mind F that they do in the comic books with what the Infinity Stones actually are and can do. And here we are with the Time Variance Authority, who this shows that they're so above in power than what the Infinity Stones can do, that the Infinity Stones are toys. They're paperweights in their world. That's just telling you the magnitude of level that we've jumped since the huge event that was Infinity War. Loki comes to realize that, you know, the best thing for him to do at the moment is to help out Mobius. And then we find out a little bit more about what's going on with Mobius and why he wants Loki, because there are other Lokis in various timelines that are variants. And variants are people, or entities, I should say, that disrupt the timeline in dangerous ways. And apparently there is a Loki who is out there disturbing the timeline all over the place and killing a lot of the Minutemen, the timeline's basic shock troopers, the stormtroopers. And we see that at the very end of the episode where they get burned alive from a trap that this other Loki has brought on. Now, a bit of a spoiler here for people who haven't seen or heard anything about any episode after episode 1, is that we do know that there's a female actress who is playing a femme Loki, I guess you could call it. I don't really know if you should call it femme Loki. I just call it, it's a Loki who's a female. They even list, if you look on at the part where Owen Wilson gets Loki's file in the episode, it lists Loki's sex as fluid. Sex, not gender. 2 different things, apparently. But sex, like biologically, Loki in the multiple timelines is not just male. There are some timelines where Loki could be female or other. So that was very interesting little Easter egg. I actually did pick up on that one, and there's a buttload of Easter eggs in this thing. I didn't even bother to look at all the stuff in the drawer with all the Infinity Stones, because there's probably like references to a bunch of comics that I never read, so I'm not even going to bother to go into it and act like I knew what they were. But there's some other interesting things in the background with a lot of the posters in this Time Variance Authority that, you know, their office is set up like something out of like the late 60s, early 70s. The cartoon that they played seemed like something made in the late 70s, maybe the late 60s, 70s, or early 80s. Owen Wilson is drinking a energy drink from the 90s. I mean, their main base seems to be that kind of gaudy, actually very ugly. I hate it because I was born at the end of that timeline. But this kind of very garish 70s office equipment kind of look and theme and everything about it. But we're going to find out a lot more going forward in the series. I'd be remiss not to mention this, though, that they do go... At one point, Mobius is showing Loki a tape of his life, and they stop at a point where Loki... I kid you not, Loki apparently was D.B. Cooper. Which, if you don't know what that is, there's a famous... I can't remember what decade it was, but there's a guy named D.B. Cooper who actually robbed an airplane and jumped out, and nobody knows what happened to him. They found the money scattered, but nobody knows whatever happened to this guy. And they say, in this episode, they say it was Loki who got hit by who got snatched up by the Bifrost, and then the money went flying everywhere. And that's what happened. That's what happened with D.B. Cooper. I always love it when science fiction and fantasy shows like this, they take something that's in reality that's unexplained, like Amelia Earhart or a bunch of the Titanic or the Bermuda Triangle or whatever it is, Bigfoot, whatever, and they explain it away as part of their wacky ass universe. I think that's pretty cool. But the one sad thing we did see when Loki went back later and was able to look through his own timeline is him seeing what his actions after the first Avengers movie would bring about. He sees the fact that he actually led to his mother's death. He also saw Odin pass away. He did get to see him standing side by side with his brother during Thor Ragnarok. And then, of course, what we all were waiting for him to see was his death at the hands of Thanos in Avengers Infinity War. That visibly shook Loki, like really, really shook him. And it was one of the several steps in breaking him. Again, that's why I wonder, did Owen Wilson's Mobius character know this was going to happen? Is this all part of the planned timeline, or is this outside of it? I want to know if they're going to play with that. I'm not guaranteed, I'm not sure, but that's something they could do. But this was all part of the process of breaking Loki down and getting him to work with Owen Wilson and the TVA in order to stop this rogue Loki, this variant Loki that is going around and murdering people and screwing up timelines all over the place. Now, all of this is feeding into what this multiverse theme that is probably going to be going on for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, God knows how many years of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We saw hints of it at the end of WandaVision because there was a lot of Wanda looking and searching for her kids in that extra credit scene at the end of WandaVision who exist in a different timeline. We know that the next Doctor Strange movie, which Scarlet Witch will be in, is called The Multiverse of Madness. And here we have Loki hinting at the multiverse, and even the Spider-Man movie is supposed to have some multi-Spider-Verse stuff in it. Just a key indication that we're on to something even bigger than that, which I'm amazed that they could do something and make it feel like what we're in now is 10 times bigger than the Infinity War threat, which was the whole point of Marvel Phase 1, 2, and 3. So kudos to them for doing that with just that very simple comedy device that actually works for the entirety of Phase 4. But I want to know what you guys thought about this. I enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed it a lot more than I enjoyed the first episodes of WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I'm very curious to see where we're going with this. I'm very curious also to go back and look at and really examine and see some of the hidden messages and Easter eggs throughout the series. There's a lot of stuff you want to think about with Mobius. One thing, they do have this part where this little girl in this church in France, I believe it is, she points to this devil imagery in the stained glass window. The producers and the creators of the show have said that that is not a reference to Mephisto. So before the Mephisto rumors start up again, the showrunner said it's not a reference to Mephisto, and it's not a reference to Loki's horns. We'll see. They may be throwing us off on that, but that's part of the fun over the next 6, 7, 8 weeks, however long the show's going on, is to do all that speculation. But again, I enjoyed the show. I want to know if you guys enjoyed the show. Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. Until next time, thank you guys for watching. And of course, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and definitely share this on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, wherever you talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Loki. I will see you guys next time for more entertainment reviews here on the Rantin Review. Have a good day.